All right, hi. Again, I want to apologize for being a little late in getting this week's information out. As I said in the announcement, I've been under a couple of deadlines that have been really pressing on my time, and to be honest with you, I kind of spaced the fact that I hadn't gotten these things out here because so much of this stuff I've already been able to produce on the front end. So I apologize for that, and it is now Monday afternoon, and this is really the class meeting that will start on Wednesday. So we're still in okay shape. It's just not as fast as I have been on previous things. So I apologize about that. I did get the observation twos graded. Your post observation conference assignment is coming up, and that again is. Uh, if you haven't been working on it, make sure you get working on it quickly because the transcription part of that assignment will be the most difficult. So, without any further ado, I want to jump into chapter 17 and professional development, which is a really, really critical component for your action as a supervisor within instructional supervision and development within schools. So, um, the text lists a total of 14 different characteristics of effective professional development. I'm not going to read through all of these. They're there. I have put them on a couple of slides here. I think a couple that are um, worth noting, though. Obviously, the first one I think is really important. When we plan for professional development, um, is it is that something that's happening outside of the participants or with the participants? Right? Not only the planning, but implementing and evaluating. Um, you know, are administrators taking feedback from teachers or from classified staff, or whoever the professional development is for, about what it is they need, how they can do those things? If these are the goals that we have as a school or as a district, what do you need in order for you to be best capable of reaching those goals? Those are the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about and looking at. I think number four is also another really important piece when thinking about professional development. Um, the ways in which we provide a coherence and a seamless thread that runs between our various activities is very important. We know the downsides and the ill effects that come with one-off type um, professional development activities, and we shouldn't engage in those kinds of things. So I really think that you need to be thinking about this as an administrator. You need to be thinking about this as a larger plan, and how do these activities interweave and provide a coherence for teachers. And sometimes maybe it's the introduction and then the implementation and then the follow-up. And so across a series of days, it's all focused on one topic, but different layers and aspects of that particular topic. Obviously, administrative support. We're going to talk about some examples that I think the clear thing here is that professional development isn't something that we can provide lip service to. In order for it to be really worth teachers' time to engage with, we have to support it. That means not only support it with time, but with resources. We can't expect teachers to engage in some kind of new activity without the kinds of resources they need. And again, that resource may be extra time, right? So we introduce a topic, but where's the time or where's the space or the opportunity for teachers to work on that? So, for example, and I know I'm taking a lot of time on this, but I think these are important. So, an example, um, we look at we want to do increased technology integration, or we're going to launch a one-to-one. And so we have a day, maybe a full day in service that we're working on various kinds of introductions to things. But then where are the spaces and times for follow-up, for teachers to engage with the implementation? How does that play out? What does that look like? How do we do that? And those are the kinds of administrative supports that are really important. Here are the remaining ones. I think these spaces of 7 through 10 are back to chapter 4. And those ideas of quality adult learning, and are we engaging with those practices? Um, 12, follow up and support. transfer from initial learning into long-term practice, right? How does that work? And then how do we assess? We've talked about program assessment, but we ought to be assessing what's happening with our professional development. So here's just a host of different kinds of formats and other ways in which we can think about teacher professional development, and just a host of varieties. There's not one way to do that, right? So there's 3 examples. The book talks about professional development as district-wide, as school-wide, and as individual level. So the example, the Buckeye School District being teacher assessment program, here was a school district that had a really clear vision of the way in which they were going to induct and help beginning teachers move from that beginning phase into a veteran phase, right? How do we help folks through that space, and being really intentional about the way that looked and the way in which they went about that. Thought that was an interesting read. The site-based or school level, right? So we had this inner city Chicago school that again was working to create space and time for teacher collaboration. This use of improving instruction, so I have a particular strategy that I want to implement. I videotape myself. I assess my video. I then go back and have peers look at it and get additional coaching to help with that process. Again, allowing space, allowing time, providing the resources in order for that to happen. And then we had the middle school example, right? The individual middle school. And I'm sorry, I want to flip back to that because it's this was the personal goal, kind of almost an action kind of research kind of space where what are they doing, setting these goals individually, working through them. So the question for you to ponder as you look at those 3 really very different but all very effective programs, the different not only because of the kinds of tasks, but the fact that they were at the district-wide, the school-wide, and the individual level, classroom level. What makes those programs so effective? And how do you see any of those kinds of things that you note as what caused them to be effective implemented into your school district? So you may want to pause, ponder that for a little bit, and then or come back to it later. So stages of professional development, the text talks about the fact that there are really 3 kinds of stages. There's the orientation, there's the integration, and the refinement. So again, as we think about that continuous and coherence of program, are we providing all of those stages within the professional development program? Are we simply continuously orienting teachers to new strategies? Right? Are we simply always just throwing new things out and never giving space, time, or resources for the integration of those stages, an assessment of that integration, and then an opportunity for refinement? If we're not doing all of those things, then we're really missing out in that process. There's some things to think about on the front end. When you are, oftentimes we think about professional development as these days, and that frames people's mindset around what happens in those days. So here are things that you ought to make sure are happening within those professional development days, because these kinds of small things are what will be the lasting memories for folks if they're not taken care of, right? No matter how good the work is that you do, if these things aren't addressed, people won't have a good experience, right? So as you think about these kind of nuts and bolts things, different things that I would suggest. Look, I spent a lot of time on professional development days. I would get to school maybe even earlier than I did on regular school days, because I would work to make sure that the room was ready. Work to make sure that every single little detail within the room was taken care of. I needed them to work in particular group sizes, if I needed particular audio video kinds of things, give myself plenty of time to make sure that's all up, running, and working well, right? So room setup, room comfort, always provide opportunities. A lot of things that some things that I would do. Looking at number three, refreshments, transition times. My secretary was always great at helping me and making sure that we had some food items available for folks to go through on the front end, and then she'd help me transition those to from kind of morning treats to afternoon snacks. Oftentimes, if it was a full day, I would provide lunch. It wasn't required for teachers to eat the lunch or be a part of the lunch activity because they still had um, their our contracts had duty-free lunch periods, and this was still a duty-free lunch day because it was a contract day. But I would always bring in lunch. I'd bring Chipotle in or Chick-fil-A or some other kind of vendor and have them provide lunch as a nice way for us to, again, have some collegiality and some interaction. And teachers always appreciated the free lunch. I oftentimes would just create, if I was using my computer for my presentation, I'd create a playlist and just have a playlist that I would maybe have available for beginning of the session, and then at any breaks I'd start the playlist back up again. If I could find some kind of songs that were in line with what we were kind of looking for, I'd include those in the list. But the real function of that was it also helped to then provide clear indicator that when I was ready to start, I'd stop the music, right? And so that change in the audio within the space would help people start to understand, oh, it's changing, so I better pay attention to what's happening. So little things like that are really helpful. Um, so the thing that happens within professional development is that we can extend, right? And the authors talked about the fact that this can be about us developing as humans, us developing within our career and moving ourselves forward, bringing forward and light ideas of how we ought to be thinking about the ways in which we act and work with compassion with our students. Think about issues of justice. Are there students that we are systematically leaving aside, and how do we address those and engage with those things? Obviously, a lot of time in professional development is spent around the school improvement process, but here they're talking about it in a little different way, I think is important. And then this whole notion of improving the teaching practice. We take lots of black eyes as a profession because of poor behaviors by a few people. And so anytime we get the opportunity to improve our own profession, we ought to take advantage of those things. So that ends this week's session. I hope that this has been good for you, and we will talk to you next week.